the Speaker of our National Parliament, Honourable Judges of the High Court Division, Honourable Additional Attorney General, Honourable Member of Parliament, I can see only one here. Two. Oh yes, of course, I beg your pardon. Speaker is nevertheless a member of the Parliament. So there are two here. Honourable Deputy Attorneys General, Mr. Abdul Basit Majumdar, the former Vice Chair of the Bar Council, as well as former President of the Supreme Court Bar Association. Honourable Guest Speaker from India, Mr. Mahesh Mehta, and learned advocates of the Supreme Court of Bangladesh, the distinguished journalists, and the other members of the audience. Shubho Noboborsho to all of you. In this first month of the Bengali calendar, I would have preferred to speak in my own vernacular, Bengali, but in view of the presence of a guest speaker from our great friend and neighbor, India, I have no choice but to speak in English so that he can also understand what I am going to say. The topic today is the role of public interest litigation in establishing the rule of law. Before saying anything on that topic, I would say what public interest litigation means and what it connotes. Public interest litigation in general terms means litigations in which the interests of the people are advanced. In legal parlance, it has slightly different meaning, although not very different from what is generally understood by the people at large. We have inherited our legal system from our former colonial masters, the United Kingdom, and we follow the common law system that exists and did exist in the United Kingdom. Under the English legal system, from which we have also inherited writ jurisdiction, this is known as judicial review in Britain. In judicial review cases in England, a claimant or a litigant must have his own particular interest in the matter, otherwise the court will not entertain any application for judicial review. This is called, in legal jargon, locus standi, the principle of locus standi. One must have his own interest in the matter. Now that created hell of a lot of problem for matters which involve the interest of the public at large. Now, devices have been paid to overcome this locus standi problem. And the first country to make a headway with this device is, of course, India. And it was in the late 70s and early 80s that device to overcome the rigor of locus standi problem was actually found. By this device, the great judges of the Indian Supreme Court and the High Courts expressed and ordained that if a matter involves public interest, the interest of the people at large will fill in the gap created by the locus standi of an individual. That is how this concept of public interest litigation came up in this subcontinent. A couple of months ago, when we, under the leadership of our Honorable Chief Justice, Mr. Muzammil Hussain, visited Australia, the Honorable Chief Justice of Australia told us that India has devised a unique system to overcome the problem of public interest, to overcome the question of locus standi by devising what is called public interest litigation. And through this device, they have given justice in a plenitude of cases where public interest is involved. The Honorable Chief Justice of Australia forgot or was not aware of the fact that we in Bangladesh are also following this public interest litigation doctrine. So our Honorable Chief Justice reminded him that we are also following that. Then the Australian Chief Justice congratulated us for doing that. Now, the Chief Justice of India, His Lordship Mr. Justice Bhagavati once said, in fact he repeatedly said this, that judicial review is the norm by which the rule of law is actually administered and preserved. There is no doubt whatsoever that judicial review, which is known as writ cases in our jurisdiction, is in fact a great attribute to preserve and maintain the rule of law. And this is the same doctrine, this is the same legal system by which the interest of the people at large is protected. It is unfortunate that in Bangladesh there are people around, as there are people around in India, who are not least interested in the interest of the people. They're only interested in their own benefit. They can only look into their own benefit. They don't care whether the rivers should exist or not, whether the forest should exist or not. All they want is to grab the rivers and to grab the forest, grab the hills. Unfortunately, we do not have enough forestry as we should. We don't have enough hills as we should. In my infancy, I grew up knowing that Bangladesh is a riverine country. I regret I cannot say that anymore. Bangladesh is no longer a riverine country because of the greed of the people. Mahatma Gandhi said, this world is enough to feed every mouth, but not enough to feed or to satisfy every greed. And that is exactly the position. The greed of the people is such that today, when I leave this country and leave the town, I see, my heart bleeds to see that the rivers have been grabbed by land grabbers. The hills have been demolished to the ground. They don't have any humanity. Fortunately, some organizations and some learned lawyers have come forward realizing the devastation that these grabbers are actually causing. We should not forget that they are very powerful people. They can be termed as mafia. Their financial wealth is so enormous that they can do many things. So those learned advocates and those conscientious people in our society who have dedicated themselves to protect the environment, have taken great risk to themselves. Only the other day, we had the tragic news of Rizwana's husband being abducted. That obviously came as a shock to every citizen, including our Honorable Prime Minister herself. She immediately ordered all concerned to do everything possible to locate this abducted gentleman. Now, the matter is obviously under investigation, and the police deserves to be congratulated and saluted for their sincere effort, as a result of which he has been located eventually. But it reminds us, I should not say anything which may interfere with the police investigation. Police will eventually, I'm sure, find out who the culprits are and bring them to law. But this tragic incident reminds us that there do exist in the country very powerful lobbies, powerful mafias who can do such deplorable and silly things in the society. Government is obviously doing its best to do away with such powerful lobbies, but we must also remember the government resources in a developing country like us is not often enough. So, members of the civil society, members of the bar, conscientious people should also come forward to supplement the government efforts to do away with such mafia lobbies in the country, so that the people and our future generation can live in tranquility, live in peace in this country. I believe there can be public interest litigations to destroy these mafia lobbies in this country, to wipe them out from our sacred soil.